So once again, Picard and crew were cruising right along because, that's their job. And they come upon this planet in our first episode, The Survivors. Yeah. And, well, that's what they find. 2 survivors on a devastated planet. The whole planet has just been, devastated. Almost nothing's left, So there was this colony there. They're all gone. And there's just basically, a couple of acres and a house, and it's this elderly couple, and that's it. So they're like, hey, what's this all about? How could that one spot survive and nothing else? So they go to investigate, and there's all kind of mysteries abound, but there's this mysterious elderly couple there, and they don't want to be messed with or bothered, and they prefer it, especially the husband is like, hey, why don't y'all just move along? And they're like, yeah, but we need to find out what happened here. And then explain, well, there were these hostile aliens. They came along, and they were really mean and nasty, and they ultimately wiped everybody else out. And, I guess we were just lucky, so. Well, that's not good enough of an answer, so Picard, of course, is like, let's look into this. And so, they study it and whatnot. Meanwhile, Chancellor Troy, oh boy, she's got this song in her head, and it just won't stop. You know when you get a tune stuck in your head, no matter what you do, you can sing it out loud and stuff, but oh my God, it just won't go away. Well, for her, it's really, really bad, and it's driving her up the wall. Beverly tries to fix it, but it's a serious problem. Coincidence? No, there's no coincidence at all. Turns out this is a very tragic and sad story. There's a romantic element to it, of course, but very, very, very sad. So eventually Picard begins to figure this out. So this is yet another Star Trek episode that involves a godlike character. So what happened was this mysterious old man took on human form just to interact with humanoid beings. And he meets this woman and falls in love with her. And they get married and have a life together. And they end up on this colony in their later years. And then, oh, Lord, here comes this alien force that's hostile. And negotiations, what have you, don't go well. And they end up attacking the planet. Primarily because of this godlike being trying to fool them. And he does the same thing to the Enterprise to trick them, to try to get them to leave and all that. But this just pisses the aliens off even more. And so they attack and wipe everybody out. The colonists decided they would fight the aliens, and this included his wife, who said she wasn't just going to do nothing, where he was dead set on being pacifist and not getting involved. But off his wife goes, and she gets killed. What do you mean? She's right there with him. That's not her. He just created a reasonable facsimile thereof, as she no longer exists. He's just a sad, lonely old man dealing with what happened. So, why torture himself so much? Well, it's not just that he didn't fight when, with all his power, he could have saved his wife and everybody else on the planet. But he had this code of ethics that he would not use his powers, over others. He did in order to try to trick the invaders and everything. But that was as far as he was willing to go. He was not going to actively be hostile in return to their aggression and fight them and, push them away or what have you. But the aliens were pissed, so they wiped everybody out, including his beloved wife. And he took revenge on them. And so ultimately he reveals that he didn't just destroy the attacking ship or ships, however many there were. And no, he wiped out the entire race of this alien, their home planet, all of it. They're all gone. And this, of course, was in his anger and grief and rage. Of course, after he calmed down, he was, oh, crap. I really shouldn't have done that. But what's done is done. Now, could he have recreated them and all that? But it would just be these facsimiles. He really couldn't bring them back. And the same is true with his wife. He's living there alone, and obviously another facsimile of the home they once shared and all this sort of thing. And the constant music bombarding Counselor Troy was to ward her off from being able to for her, sense of empathic abilities to detect the level of power that he was and all that. And he was trying to hide, but Picard figured it out anyway, and so the whole sad story is revealed, and the Enterprise decides to move on. What are you going to do? Is it, we're going to hold him responsible for what happened to the alien race? It's really terrible, but he's this godlike being. Are they going to take him to Starbase and they put him in the brig, lock him up or whatever? It wouldn't do any good. And the guy's a tortured soul. He's completely devastated and in ruin, and so he's paid a price either way. And who's going to judge him? I mean, if you had been in that position, either you would have taken on the aliens in the first place, or you certainly would have reacted, probably more than likely, the way he did at all the destruction. All right, maybe not go to their home planet and wipe all them out too. Yeah, but nevertheless, they decide to just leave him alone because that's where he is, alone. So that's one of the good examples of Star Trek, as a sort of a little mystery here, but then a kind of almost sad, well, not almost, a totally somewhat quiet story, despite what it implied and what had happened and everything, but also just the sad, quiet and very, very sad story for this character. And for the most part, other than the aggressive aliens to a point, there was no real villains here, just a terrible set of circumstances. And so it was a good one. It was really a good one. And they moved on, of course. They got other work to do, so they couldn't stay forever. So next up involves the Prime Directive, and it's an interesting tale on the different scenarios they would have to deal with when it comes to it. So here they go to this planet. There was this title, Who Watches the Watchers? This is a common old refrain, but in this case, I guess the Enterprise watches the Watchers, because there was a Federation team doing at an observation post on the planet, but it was obscured and camouflaged from the aliens, who are a primitive culture, and they were observing them. It seems like they could have done it for the most part from orbit, They wanted it really close up, so they've got this, lab in this mountain, and they've camouflaged it to where, as far as the aliens are concerned, it just looks like part of the mountain, but it's really a little doorway there into their lab. And this sort of deal is repeated in one of the movies later on. But anyway, it's this planet that seems to have a people living on it that are an offshoot of the Vulcans, but they're at a primitive state in their development, so there's no warp technology or anything like that. And so these people were observing them and watching them and all this stuff, and then, oh boy, they had some malfunction and problems, and their lab started to blow up, and their camouflage device fades. The Enterprise has been called for help. They rush over, they beam down, and they're trying to help them. Meanwhile, this what do they call them? The Matraxans, or I forget the name, but the primitive Vulcans. the father and his daughter, I don't know, they're up to some business, collecting something or whatever, and they happen to notice the mountain is flickering in and out, and they're like, hey, what's that? So the father goes up there, and he's able to poke his head in through the doorway, and there he is. He's seeing the Enterprise crew and the crew of the lab and all that, and they're trying to help them with their injuries and whatnot. And then Data sees the guy, and he's like, uh-oh, look, and then the guy is spooked, and he stumbles back and he falls from the top of that mountain, and it's a pretty long fall, and he's badly injured. And they're like, oh crap. So Beverly Crusher, she's there treating the other patients, so she dashes down to give aid to the guy, and immediately she can't do enough there on the ground, so she calls to beam them up. And meanwhile, the daughter's hiding, watching all of this, and she's just like, what the hell is this? Geordie's able to fix the camouflage, but it's too late. They've been exposed. Plus, one of the lab technicians had fallen out as well. He was out there. Eventually, the villagers find him. So there's all this contamination of this society. They bring the father up to the Enterprise, and they're able to treat him. He's badly injured. He would have died ordinarily, but with their advanced technology and stuff, they're able to fix him and send him back. Beverly tries to use the Dr. Pulaski method of erasing their memories, but it appears Dr. Pulaski is better at that than Beverly. Sorry, Beverly. It doesn't take. And he remembers. He remembers seeing Picard giving orders on the ship, and he begins to believe that Picard is a god named the Picard. And so he starts spreading this to the villagers. They used to have some sort of religious beliefs, but they're starting to move away from it at this point. But he's convinced it must have always been true because I saw all this amazing stuff. Meanwhile, Riker and Troy take on the likenesses of the primitive Vulcans and infiltrate the village in the hopes that they could recover the lost technician and get out. But it's really too late. Too much of this is spread about. Ultimately, Picard takes up their chiefess. She seems to be the leader of the village, and she's totally convinced, oh no, the Picard's real, he's a god and all this, and he's trying to explain it to her. So the only thing he can do, instead of trying to do trickery or whatever, he just flat out tells her what the deal is. We're not gods, we're just people from a more advanced culture. Your people, if you survive, will one day be the same, and that sort of thing. He talks her through it. He even tries to demonstrate it, says, what about the people of your past? Did they always live in the villages? And she said, well, no, they used to live in caves and stuff. And he said, well, why did they leave the caves? And he said, well, building the huts were better. And he says, exactly. That's basically what the situation is. If someone at one of the caves had seen you now with your weapons, your tools and all that, they would be amazed, wouldn't they? And she said, well, yeah, they would. And he says, well, that's what this is. And she seems to understand it, but then later on she starts asking him to bring back loved ones that had died, and he's like, she still thinks I'm a god. And that's the problem with the father that they had revived. He's become convinced that Picard's a god, and he believes that he can ask him to bring back his dead wife. He's alone with his daughter and all that, and he believes that, and he's so desiring of it. And after everything he's seen, he just, I know this can do it. I know you can bring her back. And he's trying to tell her, no, I'm not really a god. And he ends up, the guy's so upset, he's decided to shoot Picard with an arrow to prove that he is indeed a god. And so he does. And Picard, he's just got to stand there and take it, because he realizes this is his one shot to prove to them they're not deities. And so, sure enough, he takes the arrow in the shoulder, so he's going to be all right, It's going to hurt, but it does. But that's the deal, and that's, a way to go around it, of violations of the Prime Directive, and they're supposed to, even at the loss of their own lives, be dedicated to this rule, and Picard certainly stepped up to it completely. In that, and so the contamination is still there. They still realize what happened, but they have much more of an understanding as to what this is about. And then they're going to leave the observation post. They know it's there, but they said, we're going to camouflage it so you can't see it. They said, hey, how come you don't want us to see us? Because just knowing we're there, so we can observe without any interference. And it's an interesting thing, because it's like they just, well, I guess we'll just accept that. But I mean, Every time you go by that mountain, you're like, yeah, they're in there. So that's how they left it. I guess that passes muster with the Federation. Because they're a long ways off from being a warp core capability. So, but nevertheless, that's how they left it. And they seem to be that's what passes muster for the Prime Directive violation. Well, as long as they don't think you're actual gods. You know, they talk about, oh, there were these others. There were tales of these, you know, they didn't outright say gods, but these beings from the sky and stuff like it. Kind of sounds like some alien intervention did happen at some point. On who's to say it wasn't? So they weren't far wrong. And maybe it could have been earlier Vulcans, and they crashed on the planet, and these are the descendants, and that sort of thing. You could probably surmise that, or what have you. But anyway, that's how they left it. And this too was a pretty good episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation.